Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is your Inept General coming to you with another Total War Warhammer Legendary Lord lore video. And today we are going to be looking at the character of Gor-Rok, the White Saurus warrior of the Lizardmen. Now, before we kick off with the full story of Gor-Rok, just a quick caveat here, guys. The audio for this video is taken from my Missing Legendary Lords for the Lizardmen video I did a little bit earlier for the channel. So if you have seen that, do feel free to give this one a miss if you've seen it already. But if you haven't, do please sit back and enjoy. Gor-Rok, perhaps the mightiest Saurus alive. Now, Gor-Rok was born by himself and born completely albino. This, as the skinks who kind of pulled him out of his spawning pool believed, meant he had a blessing from the Old Ones himself. He seemed destined for great things. Now, a lizard man being born by themselves is almost completely unheard of, and so it must be part of the Old Ones' plan to have Gor-Rok play an important part in any of their future plans. Now, he emerged out of a spawning pool of Itza, the first temple city, and this is kind of where he's based. As we can see, the symbol for Itza in Total War Warhammer happens to have a bit of a white background there, so you wouldn't really have to change the banner much if Gor-Rok did get introduced. And he really has gone on to define himself as being one of the, if not the greatest living Saurus warrior alive. Now, he doesn't have the experience of the likes of Kroq-Gar, who's been fighting for millennia, and so perhaps it maybe isn't the greatest general alive, but just pound for pound on the battlefield, he's an absolute monster, and he's said to be absolutely massive as well, being the biggest of all Saurus, I believe he's described as. And even more so than his brethren who are bred for the same thing, he seems just perfectly built for war and slaughter. And this really is kind of his whole go-to. Now, currently he resides in the tallest pyramid of the city of Itza. He's kind of sat up there. He has some skink attendants who look after him, and he kind of just comes down whenever he needs to. They're like, oh my god, Gor-Rok, we need your help. But he come down, it's time to get back onto the battlefield. Now, he kind of rose to prominence on the battlefield. First kind of major battlefield accomplishment came in the year 315 of the Imperial calendar, which makes him hugely young for one of the Lizardmen heroes, bear in mind. That's only about 2,000 years before the current Total War Warhammer timeline, and so, for a Lizardman, that puts him as still, kind of still pretty young compared to some of the others who are knocking about at this stage. And this first battle, an item known as the Star Stellar had been pillaged from one of the temple cities by dark elf raids who had grown increasingly bold, charging into Lustria over and over again, and this was seen as the straw that broke the camel's back as far as the Slan mage priests were concerned. And indeed, it was the Slan mage priest Tepek Inzi who was looking after Itza at the time, who was like, okay, we need to deal with this right now. And he summoned Gor-Rok, and he summoned his armies, and he teleported them across to what is known as the Ashen Coast in Naggaroth. And there they faced down against the Dark Elf army. He'd thought that since they crossed the border, they were kind of safe in Dark Elf territory. But no, surprise, surprise, no one expects Gor-Rok. So he charged down, and he just kind of charged straight into the front ranks. Not maybe one for the subtlest of tactics, Gor-Rok, but in this huge, enormous charge, he said to have gone straight for the Dark Elf general, shattering his chariot with a single swipe of his enormous shield. Gor-Rok laid him low, but he didn't stop there and just started decimating rank upon rank of Dark Elves. Eventually, a Dark Elf managed to run him through with a spear straight through the chest, but this wasn't going to stop Gor-Rok, and he pulled the spear, rammed it further into himself, bringing the Dark Elf close enough that he could wrap his razor-sharp fangs around the Dark Elf's neck and just ripped out his throat. He didn't remove the spear until the end of the battle, where he just kind of withdrew it and threw it away nonchalantly, just absolutely covered in wounds and covered in blood, but not one to die easy. And so Gor-Rok just decimated huge swaths of Dark Elves during that battle, and truly earned a fearsome reputation. Ever since that time, he's fought all around the Warhammer world, fending off ogre charges, fighting off greater demons, even battling with huge sea monsters with naval combat when he had to face down against the monstrosities that the Dark Elves had managed to summon over the seas, and he has the scars to prove all of it. But truly a fearsome, if not the fiercest fighter the Lizardmen have to this day. His next great feat of battle didn't come until sort of sometime later, his next battle of note, and that was in the year 1883, so really only about 700 years before the current Total War Warhammer timeline, and this is when the chaos had started to re-emerge in the jungles of Lustria, and this mountain known as Krakatoa had been erupting, and all the skink priests and astrologers and things had been like, oh, this is a bad sign, and indeed chaos had re-emerged, and a plague army had marched on the city of Itza, and being one of its prime defenders, Gor-Rok marched out to meet it, leading a huge mass charge of stegodons straight into the ranks of these plague-ridden beasts, and absolutely managed to hold off the Chaos forces, protecting the First Temple city and preserving all the knowledge therein. Now, as far as his rules on the tabletop and how they might translate to Total War Warhammer, he has obviously scaly skin, gives him extra armor, much like we've seen with the Lizardmen so far already. He's also immune to psychology, and he's resilient, which kind of signifies this idea that he's very hard to kill. Now, on the tabletop, this translated as, with things like Killing Blow, they had a chance of just killing something outright. He'd be able to resist that and only take a single wound rather than being killed outright. Same with weapons that did multiple wounds of damage. He'd have a chance to negate all the extra damage and just take a single wound if it hit him. So the idea is just being he is tough as nails. That's what his resilient special rule would be. And in Total War Warhammer, the best way to do that is to maybe give him a massive physical resistance and just a lot of health. I think those would be the two ways to offset that resilient rule in the Warhammer series. Now, as for his items, he has two magical items, which are both very fun. He has the Mace of Ulumek, which was granted to him just because of his kind of special status within Lizardmen society, and it's said to be a weapon of the Old Ones. In fact, it's said that the Old Ones still guide the hand of whoever's using it, just making them and it an absolute wrecking machine. Now, this on the tabletop allowed him to re-roll hits and gain extra attacks as well. So really just making it an all-round better weapon. So in Total War Warhammer, that would probably translate as a very heightened melee attack skill and a heightened weapon strength as well. Now, his other item was the Shield of Aeons. Now, this shield was said to have been forged from a piece of stone or special material that was pulled out of the volcanic heart of one of the volcanoes on the Fire Islands of Lustria, and they hauled it to one of the temple cities where the skinks set about, chipping away at it and forming it into the shield it is today. But it's kind of reminiscent of stone, but as hard as metal. It's just an absolute beast of a shield. This is the shield he used to smash that Dark Elf chariot in a single blow. Now, what this did on the tabletop was it obviously provided, it was a magical armor, so some kind of magic resistance there. It also increased his armor save, so better armor boost, maybe melee defense boost. So the idea of this shield on the tabletop is that Gor-Rok being huge and massive and strong, and with this kind of massive stone bloody shield, he can just fend off vast charges. And so if an enemy model managed to charge him, they would have to take the equivalent of a sort of dangerous terrain test. And that's just the idea that just by charging him, you get into trouble and you're going to get hurt. So you could do something like maybe just give him I think Teclis has a spell where you can give units like 200% charge resistance. You could do something like that. You could do something like, if they charge him, give him the charge resistance and a very tight aura of damage around him if something's fighting him, because there's nothing you can really do on the charge action itself that I've seen from Total War Warhammer series so far. So those would kind of be my two solutions to it. Either a kind of very small damaging radius around him, or just very high charge resistance for him and any units around him as well. That could be another interpretation of the shield. And that's about it. One of my favorite characters that we're yet to see. I hope we get to see him fairly soon, but that's about it from me, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and hope to catch you all on the next one. Alright, guys, bye.